The laughter started before I even reached the restaurant door. I didn't know it then, but every smile waiting inside wasn't filled with kindness. Some were hiding cameras, others were waiting for embarrassment. My coworkers had spent an entire week convincing me that they had arranged the perfect blind date. They said she was beautiful, sweet, and exactly my type. What they never told me was that they weren't trying to help me find love. They were trying to make me the punchline of their cruel office joke. None of them expected that the woman they chose would completely change my life, or that by the end of that afternoon, the only people left feeling ashamed would be the ones laughing at us. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories that remind the world compassion still exists. My name was Rowan Mercer, and at 31 years old, I had become the quiet employee everyone overlooked. I worked as an inventory coordinator at a large home improvement company. My days were simple. I arrived early, completed my work without complaints, and went home to my small apartment where life was peaceful if a little lonely. While the rest of the office enjoyed loud lunches, office gossip, and weekend parties, I preferred reading books or volunteering at the local animal shelter. My coworkers never understood me. To them, being quiet meant being weak. Being kind meant being someone they could tease without consequences. For months, they had joked about my empty dating life. Every Monday morning, someone would ask whether I had finally met anyone over the weekend. Every answer only gave them another excuse to laugh. I ignored most of it because arguing only made things worse. Eventually, they decided words weren't enough. They wanted entertainment. Late one Friday, one of the supervisors excitedly announced that they had found someone who wanted to meet me. Everyone clapped and laughed while pretending they were doing me a favor. I felt embarrassed, but a small part of me hoped maybe they were sincere. Maybe someone had honestly thought I deserved a chance to meet a good person. The restaurant they chose was a cozy family diner filled with warm sunlight pouring through enormous windows. It was the kind of place where elderly couples shared pie and children laughed over milkshakes. Everything felt calm as I stepped inside. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone in a red booth wearing a simple sky blue dress. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and she held a menu with quiet concentration. She wasn't scrolling through her phone or nervously looking around like most people waiting for a date. Instead, she simply watched the sunlight dance across the table as though appreciating every peaceful second. When she noticed me approaching, she smiled politely. Before I could even introduce myself, she gently pointed toward her ear and then to a small notebook resting beside her plate. Only then did I realize she was deaf. For a brief second my heart sank, not because she was deaf, but because I immediately understood what my coworkers had done. They hadn't chosen her because they believed we belonged together. They believed putting an awkward, quiet man on a date with a deaf woman would create an unforgettable joke. I glanced toward the restaurant windows. Outside, standing on the sidewalk pretending to drink coffee, several coworkers were already holding their phones up, recording everything. My face burned with humiliation. I could have walked away. Instead, I looked back at the woman sitting across from me. None of this was her fault. I sat down. She smiled again. She wrote her name carefully inside the notebook. Mari's. Underneath, she added another sentence explaining that she had lost her hearing when she was 7 after a severe illness. She apologized in writing if communication became difficult. That apology broke my heart. She had nothing to apologize for. I smiled warmly, borrowed the notebook, and wrote that I knew enough basic sign language to introduce myself because I volunteered at an animal shelter that sometimes partnered with a community center for deaf children. Her eyes widened. Then something incredible happened. She laughed, not loudly, not dramatically, just a genuine laugh that reached her eyes. Outside the window, I noticed my coworkers lowering their phones in confusion. Their joke wasn't working. The next hour disappeared faster than I thought possible. We communicated using simple signs, handwritten notes, gestures, and smiles. Conversation became slower than speaking, but somehow far more meaningful. Every sentence required patience. Every answer carried intention. There were no interruptions, no talking over one another, no pretending to listen while waiting for a turn to respond. For the first time in years, I felt completely present. Mari shared photographs of landscapes she loved capturing with her camera. She explained that silence had taught her to notice beauty most people rushed past. The movement of tree branches, sunlight reflecting across lakes, children laughing even though she couldn't hear them. She said happiness didn't always need sound. Her words stayed with me. Halfway through lunch, I noticed something else. The people outside had stopped laughing. Instead, they simply watched. When our food arrived, the elderly waitress quietly approached me. She leaned down and whispered that she had seen the people filming outside. She apologized for them, saying kindness had become too rare these days. Before leaving, she secretly placed 2 slices of homemade pie on our table. Neither of us had ordered dessert. Mari smiled so brightly that the waitress nearly cried. When lunch ended, I offered to walk her toward the nearby Riverside Park. The afternoon sun painted golden reflections across the water while families enjoyed picnics beneath giant oak trees. There, without needing many words, we spent nearly 2 hours simply existing together. She showed me how she felt music by placing her hands gently against wooden benches during outdoor concerts, because vibrations carried emotion even when melodies could not. She explained how exhausting it could be constantly reading lips in crowded places. I admitted how lonely life felt when people assumed quietness meant weakness. For the first time, I realized loneliness came in many different forms. Before saying goodbye, she signed something slowly. "Thank you for seeing me instead of my disability." I couldn't answer immediately, because tears had already filled my eyes. Monday morning at work felt different. The office expected me to arrive embarrassed. Instead, I walked in peacefully. The videos they had recorded never became funny because nothing humiliating had happened. Several coworkers awkwardly asked how the date went. I simply smiled and answered honestly. It was one of the best afternoons of my life. Their laughter disappeared. Weeks passed. Maurice and I continued meeting during weekends. Sometimes we visited museums. Sometimes we photographed wildlife together. Sometimes we simply shared coffee while writing inside our notebooks. Slowly, I began learning more sign language. Every new phrase made her smile. Every mistake made us laugh. For the first time in years, I looked forward to tomorrow instead of merely surviving today. The biggest surprise came 3 months later. Our company organized a charity event supporting children with hearing disabilities. Ironically, management invited a local advocacy organization to speak about inclusion. Maurice was one of the guest volunteers. As she stepped onto the stage beside an interpreter, my coworkers froze. The confident, graceful woman they had mocked without knowing anything about her now stood proudly before hundreds of employees sharing her life story. She spoke about resilience. She spoke about patience. Most importantly, she spoke about kindness from strangers. Without mentioning names, she described meeting someone who had been tricked into going on a date with her, but chose compassion over embarrassment. She explained how one decision changed both of their lives forever. The room became completely silent. Several people looked toward me, others lowered their heads. When the presentation ended, something unexpected happened. The supervisor who had organized the joke approached us. His eyes were filled with regret. He apologized sincerely, admitting he had never imagined how deeply his actions could hurt someone. I accepted the apology because holding on to anger would only continue the cycle that kindness had already broken. Months later, our office changed in small but meaningful ways. Sensitivity training became mandatory. Accessibility improved throughout the building. New employees were welcomed instead of mocked. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Sometimes all it takes is one act of dignity to expose years of casual cruelty. One sunny afternoon nearly a year after that first meeting, I returned with Maurice to the same diner where everything had begun. This time nobody stood outside recording us. Nobody laughed. The same elderly waitress recognized us immediately and smiled before bringing us 2 slices of pie without asking. Maurice squeezed my hand across the table. No notebook was needed. No explanation was necessary. Some feelings are understood far beyond words. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy so together we can spread compassion one story at a time. Special request before we end. Please comment with just one word: kindness. If you believe every person deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not judged by appearances or disabilities. As we left the diner that afternoon, sunlight filled the streets exactly as it had the day we first met. The difference was no longer the weather or the place. The difference was us. A cruel prank had accidentally introduced 2 lonely people who simply wanted to be understood. The coworkers who had hoped to create humiliation ended up witnessing something far stronger than laughter. They witnessed respect replacing prejudice, patience defeating mockery, and genuine human connection growing where cruelty had planted its seeds. Life rarely gives us the chance to silence hatred without raising our voices, but sometimes the quietest smile speaks louder than every insult ever shouted. And on that bright afternoon, walking hand in hand beside the woman who had taught me that love doesn't always begin with words, I realized the greatest victories are often won through simple kindness that refuses to disappear.